In the United States, American football is the most popular sport, and it's not even close. The NFL is king. It is the most popular. The second most popular is collegiate American football. It is easy to think it has always been this way, because even non-sports fans know about the NFL and its marquee event, the Super Bowl, a cultural phenomenon to the point where the Monday after is an unofficial national holiday in the States. However, it is widely known, despite the fact that today it seems unthinkable, the NFL was once a small, oft-forgotten league. Baseball was America's pastime without question. That changed because of the events of the 1960s, but not the NFL of the 1960s. It was in large part thanks to the Kansas City Chiefs. No, not those Chiefs. These Chiefs.
65 horsepower trap. That might pop wide open, Rats.
Running play coming to Garrett on a trap. Touchdown! Garrett scores.
And this league.
I remember a great many sports events. However, I doubt that anything was more important than the establishment of the American Football League.
What the American Football League was the shot in the arm American football needed. It was flashy, offensive-focused, a pass-friendly league, allowed for two-point conversions after touchdowns, and marketed its stars by putting their names on the back of their jerseys. However, it was a controversial experiment. It only came into existence because of the 8 original owners, nicknamed the Foolish Club, and the cities where the teams were based, all having wanted teams, but the NFL was strategic and conservative and was not ready to expand just yet. Given the NFL's dominance on paper, the players that the AFL used were considered far inferior to the NFL's, which is why every year when the AFL champion challenged the NFL champion, the NFL refused to get on board until...
Hello again, everyone, from the Coliseum in Los Angeles, and this is it, the American Football League National Football League Championship.
The first Super Bowl. Except it wasn't, in just about every way. It was nothing like the Super Bowl today. A day game in a stadium that was 2/3 full. It was not very well marketed. It is the only Super Bowl, excluding the pandemic-affected Super Bowl 55 in Tampa, that failed to sell out. Green Bay dominated with a 35-10 win, but this video is about the franchise that lost that game, the Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs began life as the Dallas Texans, and their owner was Lamar Hunt, the most important person with regards to the creation of the American Football League. Through 1958 and 1959, he was super desperate to own an NFL team. The 1958 NFL Championship game, dubbed the greatest game ever played, put pro football on the map. In front of the nation on television, the Baltimore Colts defeated the New York Giants 23-17 in the first game to require sudden death overtime to determine the winner. That game was played in the old Yankee Stadium. How fitting football began its upward growth in a baseball stadium, the house that Ruth built. Hunt was really hopeful to get a team in his hometown of Dallas, Texas. He tried and failed in 1958 and 1959, and he was offered a 20% stake in the Chicago Cardinals, which he declined. It was after this Hunt decided he would form a rival league. Hunt once said, "Why wouldn't a second league work? There was an American League and National League in baseball. Why not football?" Hunt contacted other individuals who had expressed interest in the Cardinals franchise. Bud Adams, Bob Horshaw, Max Winter, and Bill Boyer, and asked if they had interest in joining a second league. Adams signed on very quickly, and the others would follow. Hunt sought teams in Los Angeles and New York City. He got Baron Hilton and Harry Wismer to own teams respectively. In addition, Ralph Wilson joined as the owner of the Buffalo Bills, and William Sullivan joined as the owner of the Boston Patriots. Remarkably, the league nearly failed to play a game. Winter announced that he was withdrawing from the league to accept his franchise in Minneapolis as an expansion team in the NFL. Seemingly as a reaction to the threat of a rival league, the NFL was now all of a sudden passionately supporting an expansion team for Dallas. But Hunt declined that offer. He said the AFL had become so important to him, he was not ditching the concept. "I had a lot of money in it, a lot invested in it. Emotionally, I spent a lot of time, effort, and energy on it. I felt an obligation. A guy like Billy Sullivan had everything he had in it. It wouldn't have been the right thing to do." So the Dallas Cowboys joined the NFL instead, and the AFL would begin play in 1960. Hunt may have regretted that refusal of the NFL's offer when it became very clear that the NFL's Cowboys were more popular in the city than the AFL's Texans, despite the fact the Texans were having more on-field success. In 1962, the Dallas Texans prevented 3 consecutive championships for the Adams-owned Houston Oilers by winning the December 23rd championship game in double overtime, despite a famous coin toss error from Dallas captain Abner Haynes, who was instructed by head coach Henry "Hank" Stram, more on him later, that in the event that the Texans won the coin toss, to choose the end of the field facing the stadium clock, which would give the Texans the wind at their backs, as the team could choose either an end to defend or whether or not to receive the kickoff. The Texans did win that coin toss, but Haynes, under the assumption that after the Texans elected which end to defend, the Oilers would elect to receive the kickoff, giving themselves first possession of the ball in sudden death overtime, told referee Harold Byrne, "Will kick to the clock." However, by starting with "will kick," Haynes had made the election for the Texans to kick, allowing the Oilers to choose which goal to defend. In the end, it didn't matter, as the first period of overtime ended without a score and the teams changed ends. 2 minutes and 54 seconds into double overtime, Texans kicker Tommy Brooker converted a 25-yard field goal to give Dallas the win. Haynes joked in the aftermath of the game, "I knew we'd need the wind behind us in the 6th quarter." I bring this up to show the Texans were a good football team off the back of quarterback Lenny Dawson. He played his college football at Purdue, largely choosing to go there over the alternative of Ohio State because of assistant coach Hank Stram. Dawson was drafted 5th overall by the Pittsburgh Steelers before being traded to the Cleveland Browns. He was then traded to the Texans and was reunited with Stram, who had been recruited by Hunt as the Texans head coach in 1959, who gained a reputation for being an extremely well-dressed individual.
But Hank also had the approach to the way he dressed on the sideline. When he walked out of his home, he was going to be viewed satirically proper. He made sure that he was always exquisitely dressed.
They always used to laugh because guys that would have seen his closet at his home, it was like you're in a dry cleaner's because he would have coats with certain shirts, with certain pants and all that sort of thing.
He had a custom tailor in Kansas City. I remember the name was Verrill's Tailors, and Verrill would custom tailor the jackets and slacks for everybody on the team, including coaches, each season. He had a dress code, and you had to have shirt and tie, and you had to wear the black jacket that was a part of the wardrobe, as well as houndstooth slacks.
But because of the popularity of the Cowboys, the city showed it was not able to host 2 pro football teams. And after its 1962 championship, Hunt looked to relocate the team. This is interesting, given when we think of relocating sports teams, we tend to think of teams who are not just in financial strife, but are also struggling on field. In fact, the Cleveland Rams moving to Los Angeles are the only other example I can think of where a team won its league championship before immediately moving to a new city. When Kansas City Mayor H. Roy Bartle learned of Hunt's interest in a new home for the Texans, he extended an invitation for Hunt and Jack Stedham to move the team to Kansas City. This city, by the way, is in the state of Missouri, not Kansas, even though there is a city in Kansas called Kansas City, and it's literally on the other side of the state border. Bartle promised to add 3,000 permanent seats to Municipal Stadium, as well as 11,000 temporary bleacher seats. After Stram and Stedman visited the city, they liked the idea, and on May 22, 1963, Hunt announced he was moving the franchise to Kansas City. Bizarrely, the relocated team was initially going to be named the Kansas City Texans, despite not playing in Texas, but thanks to the insistence of Stedham, the team would be named the Kansas City Chiefs, announced on May 26th, as a nod to the many Native Americans in the area and to Mayor Bartle, who was so instrumental in getting the team to move to Kansas City, whose nickname was, you guessed it, the Chief. The team struggled a bit in the first few years in Kansas City, but would rebound in order to take a spot in Super Bowl I, though as already mentioned, it was dubbed the AFL-NFL World Championship game, but it was the fans and media who fell in love with Super Bowl, a suggestion made by Hunt when he saw kids playing with the Super Bowl toy, which reminded him of the bowl games that conclude the college football season. The Chiefs kept the NFL champions Packers within arm's reach in the first half, down just 14-10 at the half, but Green Bay ran away with the game in the second half to claim a 35-10 victory. After the game, Packers coach Vince Lombardi made some stinging comments.
I think the Kansas City team is a real top football team, and it doesn't compare with the National Football League teams. That's what you want me to say, I said it.
Well, that irritated us, and that stuck with us until we had another opportunity to get back to a Super Bowl. We know that was a motivating factor for us to get a little better so that we can compete against the best.
The Packers would win the game's second edition when they defeated the Oakland Raiders, as the Chiefs could only manage a 9-5 season. The following year, the Chiefs began the season with a 7-1 record and finished the regular season with 5 straight wins, to close the regular season at 12-2. Level in the AFL West Division with the Raiders, setting up an AFL Western Division playoff game. Kansas City lost 41-6 at Oakland in the club's first postseason matchup since losing in Super Bowl I. The result was the franchise's worst playoff defeat, and the Chiefs were ready to rebound for the 1969 season. The season could hardly have started better for the Chiefs, winning their first matchup against the San Diego Chargers by a score of 27-9, despite quarterback Lenny Dawson playing with a bruised hand. However, that injury was nothing compared to what happened in the following week's 31-0 win against the Boston Patriots.
And I knew at the time that something happened. And I went to the bench to the doctor to have him examine my knee. They didn't have MRIs in those days, so they couldn't really tell what the problem was. And so he took some x-rays of it, and he came back and he would say, "Oh, my goodness, my goodness." I said, "What is it?" And he said, I think that you got some damage to your ligaments, and there could be a tear in there.
We found out the seriousness of Lenny's injury a couple of days after the game. There was, at least in my mind, there was no doubt that he was going to be operated on.
Henry was looking for a physician that may have a different opinion. And so he had found a doctor in St. Louis, Dr. Reynolds, who was the orthopedic surgeon for the then St. Louis Football Cardinals. He had a different theory about these type of injuries. And he said, "My theory is this: do not put any weight on it for at least 2 weeks. And every day do some leg lifts so your leg does not atrophy. Then we'll see what it's like after a couple of weeks, because it may be just a strain and not a tear." And so Henry says, "Well, there you are, Leonard." Gave you that option, didn't I? It's up to you now. I said, "The team does need you, but it's up to you now." I said, "Well."
Jackie Lee was the new starter for the Chiefs for their Week 3 matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals, playing in just their second season. But Lee broke his ankle in that game, forcing them to use their third-string quarterback, Mike Livingston. The Chiefs lost 24-19. With very little room for error, Mike Livingston led the Chiefs to 5 straight wins following that loss to the Bengals, as a result of their very strong defensive unit, which forced plenty of turnovers and would often score nearly as many points as the offense. This, for the Times, was a very unique defense.
We fielded our starting team my second year with the Chiefs, and I started at outside linebacker. I was one of 3 white guys that played, and we started with 8 blacks. You got to remember the times. That was not the norm by any stretch, but I think Hank Stram, to his undying credit, looked at the great minds of great football talent that was in a lot of these black schools, especially in the South.
We don't particularly care what color he is, what nationality, what anything. The only concern we have is bringing them in with the idea of competing for our squad, and if they earned a right to be a member of our 40-man squad, then they're going to be here.
This was the case thanks to the Chief scouter, Lloyd Wells.
Lloyd Wells was a scout for the Chiefs who had the opportunity to mine the historically black colleges of America and to let the teams know where there was talent, where in the past that talent had been somewhat overlooked or had not been desired to be as strongly recruited.
And I must do one thing. This guy's a star for us, and he does a great job.
Lloyd Wells, he's got it running so many of these outstanding stars for the Chiefs. Lloyd, it is Very happy. Great day.
The lack of bias was one that was extremely impressive because the relationships were pure, and it wasn't something that was really pushed, but I think the individuals understood that if there was going to be accomplishment at the highest level, that everyone had to understand each other's differences and each other's similarities. And that was the way it happened to have come together and had become a great history of the success that the franchise was able to have.
The comradeship, the black-white relationships that we have are I don't think, parallel in any team, and I'm just elated with it.
During his absence, Dawson worked in the media. When Dawson returned, it was a success as Kansas City beat the Chargers 27-3. But before the next match against the New York Jets, personal tragedy struck for Dawson.
Well, we're getting ready to go to New York on Saturday, and Friday evening I got a call from my brother in Alliance, Ohio, that my father had passed away from a sudden heart attack. You know, you lose your father, you know, you're losing somebody very special. And the guys were very supportive, and they kind of left me alone.
And it really was not expected. And Lenny wound up playing the game.
The question mark that you always have is whether something such as that would take away from performance. But when you see performance that is at its same level or even higher, you just appreciate it, because I think the human part is that you wonder how well you would have done in that same kind of circumstance.
Back to throw, Len Dawson. Dawson wide open, Taylor's there, touchdown! Nobody's even close to Taylor.
You really do realize what an effort it took for Lenny Dawson to do that. Lenny Dawson is an extraordinary person, and I'd watched him do extraordinary things. We wound up winning the football game, and he took care of his business, no question, and left right from New York and went back to Alliance, Ohio for the funeral.
Despite playing brilliantly in the immediate aftermath of his father's death, it was the following game when the still grieving Dawson played poorly, throwing 5 interceptions, which were the difference in a 20. The next week, in a win over the Denver Broncos, Dawson re-injured his knee. He left the game as a precaution, which influenced the Chiefs' final regular season game against the Oakland Raiders. Both teams would make the playoffs, but the winner would get home field advantage in the first round, and again should the two teams meet in the championship game. Stram put forward a different strategy for this game, leaning almost exclusively on the Chiefs' running game. Dawson only threw 6 times, with only 2 completed passes for 47 yards and a passer rating of 62.5. He was also sacked 3 times. It was Stram's only poor coaching effort for the season. For the third time, the Chiefs went down. They lost by a score of 10-6. For the first and only time in the AFL's history, the playoffs would have 3 playoff games. The previous format saw the divisional winners play in the championship game. The only other way a game could be played was if first place in a division was tied. Then a game would be played to break that tie. Because of this, the Chiefs would have failed to make the playoffs in any other season, though perhaps if this wasn't the case, Stram would have thrown the ball more in that Oakland game. In their first playoff game, the Chiefs had worked their way to a 6-3 lead before the New York Jets began driving down the field, and off the back of a pass interference call, the ball was placed on the 1-yard line.
That 36 inches were going to be our season, our future. So as I'm heading down the field to call the defense, I'm noticing heads are starting to be bowed, concessions are starting to be accepted, that they felt we were going to lose. And my reality was that that was not a concession we could make.
There's a running play to Matt Snell behind right guard. His head of the goal line like Lamar and Gary Mays.
So on second down, they tried to run a play also into the line of scrimmage.
Running play coming off the Mathis, stops at the goal line. Lamar hits it. And again, the Jets did not make it. It's 3rd down and 1.
So then on 3rd down, what Namath did was to try to run a play action. But Bobby Bell didn't take the fake into the line of scrimmage, was able to get position to take away the pass on the outside.
What pressure put on by Bobby Bell. Bobby Bell made the Jets quarterback commit himself.
And so they kicked the field goal and tied the score. Now a field goal wins it. I had a guy on the sidelines named Otis Taylor. While that defense was holding the Jets on the 1-yard line, Otis Taylor is talking to me on the sidelines, drawing in the dirt a play that he thought could work. We're going on the field, and Otis says to me, he says, you going to call that play? I said, no, not now. I'll wait until I get in the huddle so I can tell the rest of the guys, hell yes, I'm going to call that play.
Dawson dropped back and found Otis Taylor on a play-action pass at the 50-yard line. Taylor then added plenty of yardage after the catch to put the Chiefs 20 yards away from scoring.
He's running on the free safety, so I threw it, and I really got a great release. So good I thought, oh, damn, I overthrew him. But I forgot about the other speed that Otis Taylor had. He put it into another gear. Fought his way down inside the 10-yard line. And on the next play, I hit Gloucester Richardson.
Lenny takes the snap, he fakes the run, but he'll be back to throw. He goes one deep for Richardson, touchdown!
We knew this was just the one game we had to win to get to where we wanted to go, and that is to Oakland, California, and play the Oakland Raiders. And we knew that was not going to be easy. They'd beaten us twice already in that season.
There was an 8-game period where the Raiders beat the Chiefs 7 times, but on this day, the Chiefs forced 4 sacks and made 4 interceptions. In the third quarter, on a 3rd down and long with Dawson and the Chiefs' offense backed up in their own end zone, Dawson threw a pass to Taylor, who made a controversial sideline grab.
He's back in the end zone, 8 yards. Dawson throws a wobbler intended for Taylor, and Otis makes a remarkable catch. Great grab by Taylor.
And to be able to have Lenny throw a ball along the sideline as far as it had to be thrown, and for Taylor, I believe his positions of where he was, he had to catch it with his left hand. To be able to position that ball to come in and get both feet in bounds, which I think some of them wanted to argue whether he was in bounds or not, but of course he was.
And there's some doubt whether his feet were in bounds or not. I'm not sure about that, but I guess we'll go by the official record. Anyway, he caught a pass right in front of our bench, and after that play, things started really going our way.
Back to throw, Lenny Dawson. He has time to throw. He's firing one deep, wide open. Frank Pitts. He makes the catch. He is run out of bounds at the 1-yard line. Lenny Dawson gives it a running play to Bobby Holmes. He turns the corner. He scores.
The Chiefs beat the Raiders 17-7 and were ready for their biggest test of their lives, a date with the Minnesota Vikings in Super Bowl IV. Super Bowl IV was in New Orleans, which, quick side note, was a miracle into and of itself. After Super Bowl I failed to sell out in LA, and with Super Bowl II being a big fan draw in Miami, Super Bowl III was given back to Miami, with NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle stating Miami was the perfect host. However, New Orleans was desperate to receive the hosting rights for Super Bowl IV, so they recruited the services of the legendary trumpet player Al Hirt, who was one of the most recognizable instrumental musicians at the time. He would make regular TV appearances and had a history with the NFL. At one time, he was a minority owner in the NFL's New Orleans Saints and had performed at Super Bowl I. Hirt provided a surprise performance for NFL owners as a Hail Mary attempt from the people trying to lure Super Bowl IV to New Orleans, as it looked likely it would be played in Miami for a 3rd straight year, with a performance from the accomplished New Orleans-born trumpet player. The performance received a standing ovation, and New Orleans received the rights to host Super Bowl IV. There wouldn't be many things that caused more stress for an athlete during a season than the sudden death of his father, but it could be argued the controversy that erupted 5 days before the Super Bowl came close.
A number of famous names in pro football will be asked to talk to a federal grand jury in Detroit and to tell whatever they know about gambling on sports. The pro football players asked to testify to the grand jury include Len Dawson of the Kansas City Chiefs.
A federal grand jury will begin hearing testimony in 2 weeks, January 20th, about the operations of perhaps the largest betting gambling operation in sports history. Federal officials here have been...
That hits the national news. You're getting ready for a Super Bowl game and says, my God, what the heck's going on here? Hank Stram and some other people getting together, trying to determine how to deal with the media. And finally I said, why don't we tell them the truth?
But, yeah, it was kind of weird. I mean, the gambler's name was Dawson.
There was a person in Detroit by the name of Donald Dawson who had attempted to either call Lenny or call other players in the league.
Though not related to Donald Dawson, Len had met him a decade earlier while playing in Pittsburgh.
said, I do know this person. I said, he did call me when I injured my knee, and he called me when my dad passed away to offer his condolences. That's the only thing that I've heard from this guy in years and years. And I really didn't know him that well before. We made the announcement to the media at an evening press conference, and that was basically going to be it. But Hank Stram said, this is it. This is the last time we're going to talk about this thing, because we're here to get ready for a football game.
Lenny is very quiet. He doesn't express a great deal of animation outwardly. It's very hard to tell how much it affected him. I know he was deeply hurt inside because he's a great young man.
But you also wondered about the coincidences of time, that here it is a week before the Super Bowl. If there's someone who has an investigation going, what caused it to surface at that moment in time versus some other moment in time?
We of Missouri have admiration for Len Dawson, the able and courageous quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs. It is most unfortunate that any such story about one of the nation's great athletes should be leaked to the news media just prior to the most important professional football game of the season.
From the Chiefs' perspective, they needed to quickly address the rumours and then even more quickly move on to focus on the game ahead. Prior to the start of Super Bowl IV, a very bizarre stunt occurred with a guy in a stereotypical and historically inaccurate Viking gear in a hot air balloon, which failed to really get off the ground and ended up in the grandstands.
Which maybe that was a coincidence that things were not going to go well for the Vikings that day.
The Chiefs ran out to face the NFL champion Minnesota Vikings as 13-point underdogs. This game notes an historical step forward as coach Hank Stram was mic'd up for the Super Bowl, which he agreed to the night before when he met with NFL Films' Ed Sabel, which provided some entertainment.
They didn't know where Mike was.
No, he couldn't find him.
Didn't know where he was. They didn't know where to go. Yeah, Kosulki was running around there like it was a Chinese fire drill. They look like they're flat as hell.
I did not realize that Henry had been microphoned in the Super Bowl because he hadn't mentioned it to any of us.
I wouldn't have been surprised if it was Hank's idea, to be honest with you. But virtually everything that he's said many, many times before. It's certainly entertainment.
How in the world can all six of you miss a play like that? All six of you miss a play. Come on, Lenny. Pump it in there, baby. Just keep matriculating the ball down the field, boys.
Going to matriculate the ball down the field. Where he comes up with these things, I don't know. But he's a classic. He's a showman.
It was there, wasn't it, boys? It was there, wasn't it?
And knowing Hank, who enjoyed wordsmithing, that someone in the midst of the most important game of their life could still maintain the kind of presence to offer a view of what a coach goes through, all of that was Stram.
The Vikings received the kickoff, but immediately showed signs of struggle against the Chiefs' defense. The Chiefs drove 48 yards down the field, and kicker Jan Stenrud made a then Super Bowl record 48-yard field goal. That record would stand until Super Bowl 28, 24 years later. Minnesota reached midfield on its next drive, but chose to punt. On the first play of their ensuing drive, Dawson threw a 20-yard completion before throwing a 9-yard pass to Taylor. 4 plays later, on the first play of the second quarter, a pass interference penalty took away third down incompletion and gave Kansas City a first down at the Minnesota 31. However, on third down and 4 at the 25, Vikings cornerback Ursel McBee broke up a deep pass intended for Taylor before Stenrud converted his second field goal of the day to make the Chiefs lead 6-0. In a sloppy portion of the game, on the second play of their next drive, the Vikings receiver John Henderson fumbled the ball after making a 16-yard catch, and the Chiefs defensive back Johnny Robinson recovered the ball at the Minnesota 46. But the Chiefs' possession came to nothing when Dawson's pass was intercepted at the 7-yard line by Paul Kruse. After another Vikings 3-and-out, the Chiefs worked their way into field goal range, where another 3 points would be scored and the lead was 9-0, with the Chiefs' defense not remotely looking like it would give up a big play at this stage in the game. On the ensuing kickoff, Vikings returner Charlie West fumbled the ball, and Kansas City recovered at Minnesota's 19-yard line. Dawson reflected that was a key play. Defensive end Jim Marshall sacked Dawson for an 8-yard loss on the first play of the drive. However, a 13-yard run on a draw play by running back Wendell Hayes and a 10-yard reception by Taylor gave the Chiefs a first down at the Vikings 4. 3 plays later, Ram wanted the Chiefs to run a very specific play.
Blaster, tell him 65 toss power trap. Get in there for 65 toss power trap.
Here comes Gloucester Richardson into the game with a play. He said, Hank, why don't you run 65 toss power trap? I said, we'll run that play in a long time. You sure that's what he wants? Yeah, that's 65 toss power trap.
65 toss power trap. That might pop wide open, Rats.
Running play coming to Garrett on a trap. Touchdown! Garrett scores for the ball.
Nice going, baby. Yeah! The Mentor. 65 toss power trap. Yeah! Yeah! I told you that, baby. Yes, sir, boys. Woo!
Kansas City went into halftime with a 16-0 lead. The Vikings tried to respond in the second half, and it looked briefly like the NFL champions may have had some life when they drove 69 yards in 10 plays, which included their first third down conversion of the day, ending with a 4-yard touchdown run by Dave Osborne, with the lead reduced to 9 points. A Kansas City lead of 16-7. However, Kansas City responded on the very next drive with the game ending blow.
They had an all-out blitz coming, which they generally didn't. They blitzed very seldom. I hit Otis Taylor with a little hitch pass. That was the only pass I could have gotten rid of.
Minnesota could not respond in the game's last quarter, with Vikings quarterbacks being intercepted 3 times, and with neither team scoring in the fourth, Kansas City had done it by a score of 23-7. After the season they had, after the month they had, after the week they had, Kansas City had proven itself the best team in all of professional football, completely and utterly dismantling a brilliant Vikings team. The NFL began in 1920 as the APFA. The AFL had began in 1960, and in 10 years, they had not just matched but bettered the NFL's on-field product. For Kansas City, they had proven their worth at the historically more remembered NFL-slaying AFL champion New York Jets. They had proven their worth over the Oakland Raiders, who dominated them in the back end of the 1960s. The Chiefs proved their worth over the team first to represent the AFL in the Super Bowl 4 years earlier. They had proven the talent from areas the NFL often overlooks, such as black players from the South, and the success of Super Bowl 4 in New Orleans, with 80,562 people watching the game in Tulane Stadium, demonstrated that the event could be a smash hit in cities not named Miami, and without the surprise performance of Al Hurt, preventing what well could have been the annual road to Miami for wannabe Super Bowl champions. But sadly, this game is often overlooked as a result of what the 1968 Jets did with their Super Bowl III heroics, which was an incredible feat, but many still doubted the AFL after that win. This video is dedicated to the men that ensured pro football would dominate the US and much of the sporting world.
You know, you got to remember, I am the 7th son of a 7th son. To me, that's always been good luck, and is never more true than that particular season, that particular game.
So all of us recognize that a season is almost like a lifetime of things that can happen. So to have your son there to be a part of your success, to realize that those things that were talked about from an integrity standpoint were not true and not real, you share it with the person who's truly most important to you, and that's your family.
A 3-1 NFL versus AFL pre-1970 merger ledger in Super Bowls is a lot different to 2-2. What the 1969 Kansas City Chiefs did that overcast January day in New Orleans is the stuff of legends. The team owned by Lamar Hunt, the man who ensured the AFL would come into being, and the Super Bowl would get the name it has, is the team, the one team that had solidified a sporting experiment.